Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as bell notification icon to stay up to date to powerful conversations coming your way. You can also follow our audio syndicated podcast on mindbodyspirit.fm. Today's guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is John Audette. John is a near-death experiencer with decades of research with the near-death experience and different transformative experiences. One of the co-founders of the NDE'S organization, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies. A good friend and colleague of a former guest of ours, Dr. Rima Moody. So John's going to be discussing his latest book, his decades of research, and his powerful insight to today's juncture through his own individual experiences and hard-earned research and wisdom. So without further ado, we bring on John Audette on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. John Audette, it's a pleasure to have you here as my honored guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. We're so fortunate, to have you here, as my guest.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Jacob. Thank you for the invitation.
John, what I'll have to say is before we'll give you the floor is, I do hear a lot of people like myself who've had NDE'S who don't necessarily speak of all the pioneering groundbreakers like yourself, like Dr. Kenneth Ring, Raymond Moody, Prim von Lommel, PMH Atwater, who really have done a lot of research that's gone back several decades to give what we've had a household name and identity, in mainstream awareness. So I would be remiss to say that I wouldn't be doing the work that I do today without people like yourself who, as far as my understanding, are on the Mount Rushmore of NDE pioneers and researchers. But I really want, those who haven't really heard your story or may not know you, as you've been doing this a long time, could you tell us a little bit about John Audette, your history, and how you got into NDE research as one of the co-founders of NDE'S, an organization that, I've been speaking, throughout many times and has influenced thousands of people. But I want the audience to really get to know you a little bit more and how you came to get interested in being the pioneer and just the face of NDE researchers as we know today.
Well, thank you for the question, Jacob. It's a tall question, and I'm not quite sure where to begin, except to say that my initial introduction to near-death experiences happened at the age of 8.
Wow.
In the third grade at Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Northside Elementary. My best friend in those days, Mike Waters, his mom had been taken by ambulance to the hospital. She suffered a near fatal heart attack. She was resuscitated after a period of clinical death and underwent treatment, and a few weeks later was sent home, good to go. And this particular day, Mike and I were walking home from school. He lived at the halfway point to my house, so I always stop at his place for the proverbial milk and cookies. And he was pretty sad that day, and I wondered what was wrong, because his mom had recovered and she was back home. So I asked him, "What's bugging you? What's wrong?" "It's my mom." So I thought she was okay. "Yeah, she is, but I want my old mom back." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, her personality has changed. She's not herself." I said, "Well, how so? What's going on?" He said, "Well, she's turned into a Jesus freak. All she does is talk about God and heaven and angels, and she's just not the same." So when I saw her later on, we stopped at his place and going to play out in the backyard, which was our routine. I happened to see his mom, and I told him I was glad she was feeling better and welcomed her back home. And I could definitely tell what Mike was talking about. She was a changed person. She was aglow. There was a luminescence about her. Um, and I said, Mrs. Waters, Mike told me you died and came back to life. I sure did, honey. I sure did. I said, well, what was that like? And so I'm conducting my first near-death experience interview at age 8 in third grade.
Wow.
She said she told me about her experience, and she talked about God and angels and heaven and love. God loves us all, and there's nothing to fear. Um, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to go out and play with Mike now. She said, okay, have fun. And so I kind of stored that in the back of my mind. I knew what she was saying was quite important, but at the time, of course, I didn't have the capacity, the mental or intellectual capacity to really understand the significance of what she was saying. So I have to fast forward now to 1974. Actually, I wrote a book at the inspiration of Ken Ring. It's called Love by the Light. It's available at Amazon. And I tell the story in a chapter called Cosmic Choreography, because that's indeed what it was. Um, there's just so many things had to happen. Um, I want to call it precision choreography. Um, how that works, I don't know. Uh, synchronicities um, uh, are a mystery, but they do happen. And that chapter, Cosmic Choreography, is a testament to it. So it started with that experience in third grade, but then in the year 1969, August, I was entering my senior year at Fort Lauderdale High School. My best friend, Jimmy Madonna, his brother, Dominic Madonna, had been drafted the year before. He was a few years older than us, and he was assigned to infantry in the U.S. Army, ordered to Vietnam, and he went, and he was killed in a mortar attack in August of 1969 near Da Nang. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks because Dominic was a great guy, very good looking uh, man. He kind of had Frankie Avalon good looks and very talented, very giving, taught me how to drive a car, taught me how to fish, taught me how to work on automobiles a little bit. He had a pretty cool 57 Chevy. And when Dominic was killed, I just had my first major grief reaction. And I vowed then that when I graduated high school following June, I would enlist in the Army and I would do my patriotic duty and I would sign up for infantry and I'd go to Vietnam and try to help the poor oppressed people of South Vietnam and try to, avenge Dominic's death. Didn't want him to die in vain. Well, of course, at the age of 18, you don't know anything. I mean, you're kind of naive. And my country, right or wrong, my country, and my blood flows red, white, and blue, and floats the flag. I didn't find out till many, many, many years later that Vietnam was an unnecessary war that should never have been fought. And I'm glad through all kinds of other synchronicities, I never went to Vietnam, much as I tried, and I didn't get infantry. And all of that had to happen. I go into the details in the book, but all that had to happen for me to meet Raymond Moody before the publication of Life After Life. And it's all about how I conceived what became IANS, which happened in April 1974. So what happened was when I was discharged from the Army, I decided to stay um, in Augusta, Georgia. I was stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia. It's now called Fort Eisenhower. Um, but I was uh, entering my, well, actually, it was my sophomore year because I finished so much work. Um, During the time I was on active duty, I attended classes at night. So, and that was all part of it too. I mean, the details are amazing. So that chapter is a must read in the book um, to get the full story about what happened next. But basically, I got elected president of the sociology club, my first quarter full-time student after discharge. And I asked my fellow club members if anybody had any ideas for interesting speakers that we could bring to campus, which was the purpose of our club. And only one person had any ideas, and that was Kathy Gabakian, who's acknowledged in um, Life After Life. And Kathy said, my neighbor, Dr. Raymond Moody, he would be great. He's a wonderful storyteller. And I said, well, Kathy, what would he lecture about? What's his doctorate in? And she goes, um, philosophy. I said, what did you talk about? Plato? Socrates? No, no, no. No, he's doing this really interesting research. I'm helping him with it at the Medical College of Georgia, where he was a full-time medical student, which is nearby. Uh, Campuses weren't far apart. Um, so I said, what's the research about? And she told me, she said, it's about people who are declared clinically dead, or they lose consciousness and are in a life-threatening situation. He interviews them to see, whether or not anything interesting happened while they were unconscious. And when I heard that, I lit up like a Christmas tree. I need to meet him right away. And you arrange this. I knew then that it was destiny calling me. And I kind of figured out then that everything that had happened to get me to Augusta, Georgia, and to keep me in Augusta, Georgia, was all for the reason of this meeting. So I went to meet Raymond the next day, and we, two peas in a pod, we just became best friends. And I helped him out with his research and invited him to speak. He accepted. It was the first major talk he gave about near-death experiences. The book didn't come out until 6, 7 months later. But I organized this with the club, and it was at our Performing Arts Center, and it was standing room only. And there was a panel discussion afterward with other MDs and PhDs. It was absolutely fascinating. And during that lecture, when Raymond was talking about his research and what he was learning, I just, I'm not a medium or a psychic or shaman or a channel, but I got this, I want to call it a download from spirit. I know I was agnostic at the time. I'd been raised Catholic, but I gave it up for Lent when I left my father's home at age 18 to enter the army. And I just didn't know about God or the afterlife. I decided I didn't want to buy into anything that wasn't true. I didn't want any falsehoods or deception or half truths. I wanted truth. And of course, if I couldn't find truth in a reliable way, I would have no opinions about anything. So I was neutral on the subject of God and the afterlife. And I was pretty firm about my agnosticism because even though I had tried different religions and read a number of books, nothing really impressed me as credible and something that I could hang my hat on. But when I met Raymond and he described this work, and I met some of the experiencers through him that were part of the original 150 cases, wow, I mean, I just became very impressed. And Raymond's assignment to me was, hey, John, go to the library and do what you can. This is before the internet, this is before computers, but go to the library and see what you can find on historical examples. because I know there were many going back to the time of Plato. And that's where I got really hooked on the subject and fascinated with what I was learning. And I was very curious to see whether conventional mainstream science could explain it in a way that wasn't reductionistic or dismissive. So, um, as Raymond spoke that night during the lecture, I get this download that this is really powerful stuff. This this information, not just about the near-death experience, but there's a laundry list of many other types of spiritually transformative experiences that all contribute to finding an empirical answer that's scientifically credible about whether consciousness survives bodily death, which of course it does, based on the data. All my views, by the way, are data-driven and evidence-based. Uh, I don't operate on the basis of faith. If I don't have data, evidence, I don't go there. So I went into this with a critical mind, with the mind of a skeptic, a cynic. But after meeting really literally dozens and now hundreds of people who'd had one kind of STE or another, I became convinced that God is real and that the afterlife is real and that the space-time, you know, three-dimensional, physical, material world is just temporal, transient, and fleeting, and pretty much. I mean, it's real when you're in the illusion. It seems quite real, but in reality, it's illusory. Um, so, the question is, what's on the other side of all this, and how does that guide us through the life we're in, which obviously is sort of flightless.
Yeah.
So that was, I went to Raymond after his lectures, and Raymond, I was like a kid in a candy store. I said, "Raymond, this is really powerful stuff. This can change basic human nature through science, through empiricism. Um, Nobody has to accept anything on the basis of faith. We have data, we have evidence, we have proof, and we need to form an association to bring together researchers and experiencers and the interested public, raise a lot of money for research and education so that we can get the word out, because this is a wonderful gift, and extremely insightful. It, it can shed a whole new light on who we really are and why we're really here. Um, Obviously, we're not here for the golden calf. We're here for the golden rule. I said, look, you know, how do you feel about this? Help me out with this. I want to organize this association. He goes, well, John, I love Raymond dearly. I'm not saying this is a criticism. And he'd be the first to tell you that I think it's in, he wrote the forward, wrote a lovely forward to my book. And he might have mentioned it in the forward, but he wasn't really into organizations. And he kind of threw water over the idea initially. Well, but then he asked Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to write the forward for Life After Life. And I drove him. Raymond doesn't drive. So I had the pleasure of driving him to meet Elizabeth in Atlanta. She was giving a talk at the time. It was called Kennesaw Community College. And that's where they first met physically. And I got some time along with Elizabeth, and I asked her about the association idea. She thought it was a fantastic idea. Well, she was a fellow psychiatrist. Raymond was completing his medical degree, and then he was going to go on to the University of Virginia to do his residency in psychiatry. But Elizabeth was already a practicing psychiatrist. She had already written On Death and Dying, and famous 5 stages and all. And she'd done her own research into near-death experiences. And her public posture was very different from Raymond's. Raymond would say, look, I'm a trained philosopher. I know what proof requires, and we don't have anything that rises to the level of incontrovertible uh, proof. Nothing that would pass muster with mainstream science. Um, so Elizabeth would say, I know unequivocally that we survive bodily death, that we have a very erroneous perception of what it means to die. And if we could just understand that, everything would change. We'd have heaven on earth. So Elizabeth understood. She knew that this information could not only change basic human nature, but it could change the nature of social, political, and economic systems. I had a very macro orientation to this, and so did she. She was one of the few. Most people had a very micro orientation, which is, how does it affect the individual? How are they transformed by it? What happens to them over time? Um, and Elizabeth and I were more like, how can this information be harvested and harnessed in such a way that it brings about a sea change in human behavior, human values, human attitudes? Basically, we both agreed that it was possible enough to move the paradigm from uh, every man for himself, get while the getting's good, because this is all there is, to one for all and all for one. That we're surrounded by eternity.
Yeah.
So, to me, it came down to two basic questions. Is there a God? Was the first. And the second, is there an afterlife? And that's why, I kept on with Raymond about allowing me to form the association. Elizabeth said she'd be happy to lend her name to it once it got organized and some momentum. And she said she would contribute to it as well once it became a going concern. But when I said that to Raymond, and by now Life After Life was published, and he was getting letters from all over the world, and invitations to be on Phil Donahue and Today Show, Good Morning, it was an exciting time. But among the letters that came in were from other MDs and PhDs who wanted to do their own research, and also letters from experiencers who wanted to meet other experiences so they could compare notes. So was it Syrian? I mean, we need this association. And by the way, Elizabeth's all in. So come on, what do you say? Okay, go ahead. You can use my name. Go ahead and do it. But I don't want to really be involved because I'm too busy. I've got other things to do. And like I said, I'm not really into organizations, but you go ahead and have a good time. So he agreed to convene a meeting, which happened in November 1977. Bruce Grayson, Ken Ring, Mike Sabom, Raymond.
Was this in Charlottesville?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And we came together, and I gave the pitch for the download that I received at the Performing Arts Center in April 74. This is over 3 years later that I finally got Raymond motivated to forward. And everybody agreed that it was a great idea, and they were all for it. So um, I laid out basically the whole blueprint, and they all bought in. And so we had our first, we incorporated in Illinois, and so did I happened to be in Peoria at the time in my first professional position out of graduate school. I got a master's degree at Virginia Tech and went on to Central Illinois for my first job. And I ran the association there for the first 3 years, 4 years. And then I just, I kind of took leave from it because I was macro in my interest. I was systems oriented. How can we apply all of this information to affect major social change? And like I say, I was one of the few speaking that language. Most everybody else was, well, the experiencers wanted a support group. They compared notes with everyone else who had an experience, and that's important because it's hard to reconcile oneself to this world after having been in the next.
Mhm.
So I'm not denigrating the importance of that. I'm just saying that that was their uh, emphasis. And the researchers, they wanted a data pool. They would write scientific articles or academic articles, publish, and books and grants, and they were looking for a data pool. Where you get tenure, and and I understood that too, and I'm all for that as well. But my interest was we can change human nature and we can change
Mm.
institutions. I mean, come on, guys, let's go with the program, the bigger picture. And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. We're not really interested in it. So I kind of like lost interest in it when I saw that the micro orientation strictly around near death experiences as a focus was taking root, whereas my bigger vision was not. So I asked Ken if he would take it over. So he moved it to Connecticut, changed the name to IANDS, and that's in 1981. And I kind of went on to do other things from at that point. Um, but nevertheless, the vision that I came up with in '74, I think, is still valid, and that's why I formed Eternia, which I call IANS 2.0, um, in the fall of 2012. And so that's kind of how I got started in all this. And Ken, was it 2021 around the time of COVID, where we were all kind of isolating, he said, Joan, you told me an angel encounter story once, and I never forgot it. Do you have that written up anywhere? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, well, did you write it up for me? And I said, sure. So I wrote it up, and he loved it. He said, you should publish this. I said, well, Ken, it's not just the one angel encounter. There were 8, 7 of which were life-saving. Really? You only told me about this one. What were the others? So I said, I'll write them up for you. So I did. And he said, my God, these are great. You got a book. You need to publish this. I said, well, Ken, it wasn't just the angel encounters, and a bunch of other stuff, you know, covering the gamut from major synchronicities to mystical vision quest to nearing death awareness stuff, because I directed 2 hospice programs. And, you know, that was my background, my professional background in hospital administration and hospice administration, as well as, running a big physician practice management company. And then I also did time in public broadcasting and performing arts when I got tired of healthcare. So, I did a lot in my career. But um, I said there's experiences throughout all of this that really deserve to be told if I'm going to tell the whole story. So I said, well, write all that up. So part 1 was the angel encounters. Part 2 was all the other stuff.
Hmm.
Part 3 is, well, what does it all mean? What does it meet the road? So that's how the book came about. It was really at the strong encouragement of Ken. I mean, I didn't have a near death experience. I had a lot of other stuff happen to me, but not an NDE. And I didn't really feel, that I could make a real unique contribution to the literature, but Ken persuaded me otherwise. And the book's been well reviewed, and it's been received well by those who've read it. And so I'm proud that I wrote it. And it tells really the whole story. There's so much more to it than what I've been able to share. So
I love it. Well, I think you've been able to have a karma and dharma theme within your book, where karma is kind of like the stories that you've had, and the dharma is the meaning, the essence, the purpose. And it seems like this book, it is quite amusing, entertaining, teach people on the ride, but also they could take something with them tangible I believe from reading this book that they could utilize in their own lives. So I thank you for listening to not only the 8 angelic experiences that you mentioned, but also another angel I believe in, Kenneth Ring, who, I have a personal connection with, in a sense that I was reading one of his books, Lessons from the Light, I believe.
Yeah.
And my father comes downstairs, who's also a therapist, and he looks at the cover. He goes, Kenneth Ring. I go, yeah. He goes, he was my psychology professor at the University of Connecticut. I never heard the name since the 60s. He's writing books now. And I told him, like, what he was doing is NDE research. My dad just knew him as one of his psychology professors at UConn. So pretty cool just to see how, in a way we were connected. My dad, before I was born, my dad had him as a professor, and years later I would be benefiting from the work of Dr. Ring and yourself. And just it's crazy how things just tie in from decades, in between, and how it all loops together. But you, my friend, have been a major part of the historical trajectory of the NDE phenomenon, and you were there, in some of the most prominent meetings and crossed elbows with the most prominent individuals, which is amazing, to hear. Do you ever like sit back and just ask God, why me? Why was I chosen, to play such a pivotal role, in this? I mean, I know there were certain messages, but was it something past life? Was it, something in this life? Like, why do you feel like there's billions of the people on the planet, but few people as prominent of an impact as you've had? Like, how do you think that came to be? Like, on a micro level, I know you're a macro guy, but I'm just kind of curious.
Well, Jacob, great question. It's obviously unanswerable. It's an imponderable. I mean,
Right.
I'm looking behind you and I see the angel statue, and they're always with us. And in the first part of my book, like I said, there are 8 angel encounters, 7 of which were life-saving.
Wow.
And I asked that question throughout each of these life-saving experiences. Why was my life spared when so many lives are not? Um, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that, and Raymond would be the first to agree with this. I think that the principal challenge we all face is to minimize ego.
Mm,
Because ego means divisiveness, it means separatism, it means dualism.
mm,
And I do know that the same God who made you made me.
mm,
And um, the awareness that I have right now, being aware of you and this program that we're recording, is the same awareness that you have being aware of me. So we're all participating in awareness, whatever awareness is. What is consciousness? What is the soul? Uh,
mm,
So these are great questions. They're huge gateway questions, and we don't have answers. We can only give opinions.
mm,
And people ask me all the time, what do you think the meaning and purpose of life is?
mm,
And I think it's the same for all of us. I don't know that any, I mean, you look at a Beethoven, for example. Oh my God, what a creative powerhouse. Um, if he just wrote one of his symphonies or one of his concertos, I mean, he would be brilliant. But
mm,
what a prolific creative genius he was. Van Gogh, on and on and on. You can go throughout history and think of people who've made enormous contributions. And are they different than anybody else? Well, we all have capacities and potential. Um, and yes, I do believe we're born with purpose and destiny, but I think it's the same at the end of the day for all of us. We're here to optimize our life review on the other side once we go. And we're all ready to go. Death is on everyone's agenda. Uh, we're eventually going to say goodbye to this shell, this physical body, and we're going to go to the realm of spirit.
mm,
We're going to have a life review. Um, Now we're going to be met by pure, perfect love, no judgment, no criticism, no condemnation, no punishment, um, eternal salvation, eternal damnation seems to be uh, inaccurate. What is accurate is we have a life review.
mm,
We see everything we've done, said, thought, or felt, and how that impacted the whole.
mm,
Uh, and we're seeing all this in the presence of pure, perfect love, pure, perfect compassion, pure, perfect wisdom. Call it God, call it creator, source, Christ, Buddha. These terms are sort of irrelevant at that point. But what is most relevant is what they all say, that all the experiencers who come back, they say it's an indescribable love.
mm,
If there is one quality or attribute that one can safely attribute to source creator, it would be love.
mm,
So when you go through your life review, whatever you did that was loving, compassionate, good, kind, it resonates with the creator, with source, because that's the signature vibration,
mm,
trademark attribute of the creator. And if you want to be one with creator, which is the goal, we all come from the same source. We all return to the same source. But how do you return? Well, by matching the signature frequency and vibration, by
mm,
achieving attunement with source creator, by being pure, perfect love, which is what the great mystics and sages tried to teach throughout millennia. So, you know, if you're pure, perfect love, then you're one with God. And I try to say this in part 3 of my book,
mm,
which is, what does all this mean? And I introduce an exercise called God for a Day. And I should have said love for a day, really, because God for a day sounds a little intimidating. And I don't that you mean that you literally become God. I mean, you become God's chief attribute, which is selfless, egoless love that doesn't require recognition or reciprocity. You just give for the sake and the joy of giving. The way that's what Christ said, in his teachings. The purpose of life is to love one another as God loves you. You know, very simple. So that's the meaning and purpose of life. Optimize your life review by
mm,
being as loving as you can as often as you can. Now, we're obviously not perfect and we're going to, fall short, but the idea is to continue on that path with conviction and sincerity, because ultimately, when you go, all you take with you is the love you gave. It's not how
mm,
much love you received. It's not how much you were given. It's how much you gave.
mm,
That matters. Now, if everybody comes from this point of view, you have Christ consciousness prevailing planet. You have heaven on earth. You have the return to the Garden of Eden. You're not worshiping the golden calf anymore because or ego. You're not trying to one up anybody. You're not trying to, you know, die with the most marbles.
mhm,
You see that that's just a lie. And it is. It's a total lie. On the other hand, if you devoted your life to the greater good, serving others, well, I don't just mean other people. I mean earth, the oceans, the rivers, the lakes, animals, trees, the sky, everything, the whole of the universe. Um, we're all part of the mosaic of creation. So our love should be given to everything. So, you know, there's really only two ways to live one's life. One is if nothing matters, there
mm,
are no transcendent consequences to what we do, which case, you got to believe that when you die, that's that. It's out. You go into non existence. The other way is to say that that worldview is completely false, that everything matters.
mm,
And when you die, there's a continuation of your consciousness. and everything you do matters. So, you know, Einstein said either everything is a miracle or nothing is. It's interesting when you look at the first generation quantum physicists, Planck, Bohm, Einstein, those guys, they looked as deeply as one could into the quantum realm, and they came away mystified. And they all went into it as materialist scientists. They came out of it awestruck and believing in divinity.
Wow.
And so, you know, I think there's only one major path before us, and that's to co-create a magnificent, uh, colossal future, a glorious future. And right now, here we are at this auspicious moment, the election tomorrow, and people are of high anxiety and wars, the rumors of wars all over the place. The planet reeling from one crisis after another, a lot of angst and suffering. That none of it needs to be. These are all self-inflicted wounds, born of flawed thinking, poor curses, because we're not viewing reality correctly. Well, if we understood the true nature of reality, uh, and what this life is all about, we wouldn't fall for 12 pieces of silver. Even now, this is fool's gold that people are falling for. And
Isn't it? It's an amazing association of beliefs and behaviors, isn't it?
yeah,
It's quite a profound dynamic at play, and we're noticing similar behaviors with continual passed down belief systems that have really influenced, a lot of these stagnant collective behaviors.
yeah.
But I know you mentioned a lot of your focus, within this research is more macro based. And I'm wondering, obviously, none of this, I don't know if necessarily tangible, provable, but from a high, from a from just a hypothesis standpoint, why do you hypothesize that so many people are into NDEs, and with this current juncture, what specifically, and maybe why specifically NDEs are of important to speak to this current hour that we're in humanity that you just described?
Well, we're all suffering from the God-shaped hole.
Mm,
Blaise Pascal came up with that term in 17th century. He had a near-death experience,
mm,
and he said, we have this void within, this empty space. We have this yearning to connect with something greater
mm,
than ourselves. We have this hunger to derive some kind of transcendent meaning and purpose for existence. And he hypothesized that only God can fill the God shaped hole. For him, God was real because he had an NDE back in the 1600s, and late 1600s. He was a French mathematician. And so today, we have never been more cynical and skeptical. Um, Religion is suffering great attrition, as they should, because there's a lot of untenable dogma. Uh, Eternia came up with 7 statements um, to describe what we think we know about the nature of absolute reality. They're very simple statements, and they're based on a convergence model that is comprised of, the observations of the ancient sages and prophets and teachers, the masters, the cornerstone pillar teachings of the major religions, and the contemporary findings of science in its study of not just NDEs, but spiritually transformative experiences generally. So we're hungry. answer your question. We know there's a lot of suffering, pain, anguish that doesn't need to be. We know we can do better. We're looking for a catalyst, but for something we can really believe in and trust. Because in today's world, it's hard to trust anything, hard to believe in anything. We don't know who's who and what's what. So, I mean, it's not just the NDE, although I admit that that is the one phenomenon that seems to gather the most attention and interest. But as I said, there's a laundry list of major experiences, many of which I write about in my book, that are equally compelling to speak to the major question of the two questions I mentioned earlier. Is there a God, a creator? And what is the meaning and purpose of life? And is there an afterlife? So I don't think there's nothing more important than to address those questions um, exhaustively and with rigor, with the scientific method. And you take science as far as you can take it. And with torsion physics now, torsion physics is really the bridge that marries physics with metaphysics, because it's the study of the spin fields created by thought and intention that affect quanta. Well, there you go. You know, so we can start moving into the realm of hard data and start moving into the realm of figuring out what is consciousness. How does it uh, uh, impact physical reality? We are as perfect as we want to be. We evolve into pure, perfect love. We can have beneficence now if we change our perceptions of reality. Um, and, I think I call it STEs God's breadcrumbs. They're like a trail to greater understanding of who we really are and why we're here. So that's why I say at the end of the book, in the God for a Day exercise, look, you can take my word for it, because I bear my soul. This is everything that's happened to me that brought me from being an agnostic to one of firm conviction based on data and evidence. So you can take my word for it, or if you don't want to do that, you can have your own epiphany. I like ways in which you can go out and have your own peak experience. But I say the best way to do it, in my view, is do the God for a Day exercise. Ben Franklin suggested this way back when in his 13 Virtues. He said, to have a perfect life, emulate Jesus and Socrates, meaning devote yourself to love and learning, love and knowledge. So when you do that, my God for a Day exercises were the highest high, the most amazing experiences I've had in my life, because you really immerse yourself in God's love, pure, perfect love, and you try to be a conduit or a purveyor of that love into the lives of complete strangers. The trees, the animals. I'm not just saying human beings. I mean, whatever you encounter. And you're not doing it for reward or recognition or reciprocity. You're doing it anonymously. And so to me, that is the highest high. And when you reach that state, I believe you form a resonant energy connection with God, with spirit. I certainly felt it. I mean, I had electrical goosebumps, coming in waves all 3 times that I did for God experiences. So in the book, I encourage everybody to read it, because all proceeds go to Eternia. The website for the book, by the way, it's affirminggod.com, because that's what the book does. It affirms God empirically. And Eternia.org tells you more about the Eternia strategy and the Eternia solution. You can go there to read the 7 statements and the 15 elaborations, which is our best effort to share what we know thus far from 50 years of studying all this in an empirical fashion.
Right.
So that's kind of how how I view it.
I love your work because, in a sense, it's a growing population with the advancements of science and medicine. And like you said, NDEs aren't the only transformative experience. There's so many under that umbrella. But a lot of people may feel left out that, let's say, they didn't have one of these experiences and they feel like, okay, that's for someone. And I could sit here in a lecture, but I can't have that same connection or feel that. And what I think your book, if correct me if I'm wrong, illustrates is that we all have a capacity to some degree to connect to God. We don't have to have an NDE or STE, or die to do that, that we could experience that in this reality. It's just we have to open ourselves up to that possibility and really go within. Is that, like a possible framework that you ascribe to?
That's well said, Jacob, and thank you for bringing up the point. I'm nobody special, okay? All loved by the light, all of us equally, even those who do wickedness, wicked things, evil things, even the darkest and blackest among us um, are loved equally by the light, which is, a saint would be. God, creator, my sense of it is God is pure, perfect love. Pure, perfect love cannot be anything other than pure, perfect love. God is not inconsistent. God is not contradictory or hypocritical or mercurial. Um, and you can look throughout the cosmos and see ample evidence of that. So we all have angels. And if we stop to think about the miracles that occur to us each and every day, um, we would notice the angels more readily. We get miracles all the time. Sometimes we're not aware of it, but everybody should feel equally blessed, equally loved, equally uh, protected by the angels. Um, we all have guardian angels, and they do intervene. Um, I mean, I think most people would have, if you ask them, would have a story they can't explain, some kind of otherworldly or mystical event that they can't explain. So it's not just me, it's everybody. And we're all special and we're all equally loved. And there's nothing to fear. Um, so the book explains that look, if you don't want to take my word for it, you don't want to do God for a day, okay, here are a couple of dozen other techniques you can try. And if you're sincere and you're earnest and you have stick to itiveness, you stay with it, you're perseverant, you can have your own epiphany.
And just as you said that, a rock fell. So real time stuff here, but no coincidences. I just had a rock in my apartment just fall as you said that. So I know that is a confirmation
Mhm.
from the universe
What?
about that. But
Oh, work?
it yeah, well, like a crystal. Yeah, I have crystals in my place and it literally just fell. So
Oh,
pretty
cool.
pretty cool. But it's funny the juxtaposition, I suppose, of the religion and spirituality. Yeah, that's predicated on empowerment. Where religion, it's almost like these people were holy, they did this, and that was their thing, and I'm just a nobody. But if you look at religion on a closer extent, especially the New Testament, Jesus himself, said the kingdom of heaven in me is in you too. And I think that really is what is gravitating people to more of a spiritual orientation, where it's not about giving the ball to someone else or the monopolization of some holy roller and we're a nobody, that we all have this capacity to connect. We are everything and nothing at the same time. It's kind of like, but we just have to recognize, like you said, we all have the ability to connect. And it's not just to pass the ball to someone else. It's not like it's Jacob's thing, it's John's thing. There's enough slices of the pie to go around for all of us to have these mystical connections and experiences.
Well, I love what Ram Dass used to say before lecturing to a large group. he would say, I'm often asked if I get nervous speaking to a large group. He said, and I answer it this way. No, I don't get nervous at all because I remind myself that there's only one of us here.
Wow. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
So, I love that. So that's the truth of the matter. There's only one of us here. And you brought up this thing about Christ. And what he was saying is, and Christ has been misinterpreted. I get asked questions a lot, am I a Christian? Well, yes, but not in the Orthodox traditional sense. But yes, Jesus is my hero. Uh, he demonstrated pure, perfect love on the cross when he said, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Mm,
Um, he said, these things I do, you can do, and greater.
mm. Wow. And greater. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
except that you be like me, you cannot know God. Except
mm,
what except that you be like me. What does that mean? Well, what was Christ? The same as what God, but pure, perfect love.
mm, mm,
Uh, love your enemies as yourself. Why? Because you're one and the same. Um, and he was trying to encourage people not to worship him, but to emulate him.
mm,
Thomas Jefferson understood that. That's why he had his own Jeffersonian Bible that he read from every night. He excerpted stuff out of the New Testament that was aligned with his point of view. It's what Ben Franklin said, emulate Jesus and his 13 virtues. So these guys knew what they were about, and it is the only dance there is. So if we understood this, if we'd stop clubbing ourselves with femur bones in the tar pits, and we would reestablish the Garden of Eden. There's no reason for us to be stuck in the muck and the mire like we are. It's child's play. It's worse than child's play. It's worse than adolescent. It's worse than juvenile. So what is evil? Evil is lack of love.
mm,
So the book, I try to simplify God. I try to demystify God. I
mm.
try to simplify enlightenment. I try to demystify enlightenment. There's nothing really complicated about it. And there are no men under the bed waiting to, take you away. It's all about your own ego and learning to uh, keep it in check or send it packing. If you go into oneness, you go into unconditional love. When you go into unconditional love, you go into oneness. They're just hand in glove. So it's really not complicated. The book goes into great detail about all of these points. It tells a lot more stories. I encourage people to read it, but more importantly, I encourage them to go do the God for a Day exercise or love for a day. Can't do it for a day, do it for an hour. Do it for however much you can, and that's the beginning of your awakening, your enlightenment.
Love it. Imagine, from day one, if we weren't so fixated on regurgitation and more about God integration, what a different world in many senses we would be. And I know this book is a terrific pamphlet for any seeker just to really enhance your journey to walk a little bit easier and more in alignment, with higher truths. So, John, remind our viewers, where could we find you in your, latest published book? And do you mind just showing it up for the viewers? I know it's hard for my audio syndicast, followers to hear, but yes, this is Loved by the Light. John Audette worked very closely with my good buddy Raymond Moody, who's been on the podcast.
Yes,
Beautiful cover. I see, a beautiful road and a light at the end of the road. So yeah, it reminds me of a statement that I've cover in a way that we know that there is no end of the road when we understand eternity, which will allow us to really navigate the curves and turns a little bit easier, knowing that this road is endless. That in many ways we can't fail, we can't die, we go on. We're going to be continuing to travel this road for eternity and try to make it the most beautiful, synergized, spiritual journey that we can. But yes, John, where could we find your book? And if my viewers want to contact you, where's the best place to do that as well?
they can, my book is available at Amazon.com.
Mhm.
And if they want to contact me directly, it's best to do it through affirminggod.com or eternia.org. There are ways there to send questions and comments.
Cool.
And, it's, yeah, it's, Ram Dass used to say, uh, we're surrounded by the infinite now, and, or I should say the eternal now and the infinite here. So when you grasp eternity and infinity, there's no limitation. And we have here, we have now, and that's all we have. And we're challenged to bring our highest and best into the here and now.
Mhm.
And to the degree we come from love, we're on the right path. To the degree we're not coming from love, but ego, uh, we've got work to do. And you don't have to get it done in this lifetime. I mean, you've got infinity and eternity to play it all out. But the sooner you get it done, the sooner you, I think, reemerge as reintegrate as one with source creator from whence we all came. And that's to me the eyes on the prize. Now I've exceeded data here, and I've given some personal opinion as I do in my book, but I always qualify it as that. Um, but we put together this philosophy or worldview or cosmology, if you will, extrapolating on the data in a way that I feel is defensible and logical. And I wish we all could wake up and uh, enjoy the magnificence that God has bestowed upon us. Um, and I think writing that book was a step in that direction because I hope more and more people will read it and be inspired by it.
Mm. Yeah. It's one thing to lament over problems, but it's another thing to lean into solutions. And it seems like your way of trying to provide solutions has just been, decades of bringing this information out, writing your book, being courageous. I'm sure taking the hits when a lot of people weren't as on board with this stuff. But, we thank you tremendously for your ongoing contribution just to allow people to remember who they are and to remember that we're so much more connected to different parts of the universe than we'd ever imagined. So I really thank you for allowing an opportunity for people to be more in alignment with their true selves and reality.
Well, thank you for giving me this platform. And I just quote Ram Dass one more time in
I
closing.
love it. You could quote Ram Dass all day, my brother.
It's the only dance there is.
It's the
And
only dance there is. Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm happy to do what I've done. I just wish I could have been more successful at it. I mean, uh, people say to me, uh, what are the indicators of success for
Mhm.
Eternia or for IANs before it? And my bar is set pretty high. It has to be. If Eternia is successful, that's an end to hunger, illiteracy, violence, war, uh, egocentrism, nihilism, materialism, separatism, dualism. It's an end to all of it. And where are we as a species in relation to that? We're a long way from it.
Sure.
We can get there literally overnight if we all have our own epiphanies. So if it becomes as real for people as it has become for me, then, as I say, the transition is expeditious.
Mhm.
Literally, like going into a dark room and turning on the light switch.
Mhm.
But it starts with having your own epiphany and it being real for you at a personal level.
Mhm. Well, I certainly thank you for listening to your greater angels and all these experiences. And I know we could all be our biggest critic, but I have no doubt that in many ways, the measurement of our life is if the tides around us have been risen, the
Yeah.
boats around us have been risen from our tides, and I have no doubt that you really have risen. So many boats around you and have elevated the planet And many times we just don't know the impact while we're here. And once we're over there, we'll find an understanding of the greater tapestry of our impact. But the fact that we're seeing it right here, right now in real time, you're going fast and moving fast. When you're on an airplane, you can't even recognize how fast you're moving sometimes. You don't even feel it. And sometimes we're making an impact. We don't even recognize it. We just kind of put our head down, do our thing. But from a bystander, I could tell you, John Audette, the world is much better from you being here and continuing to do the work than it was before. So we do thank you for that
Well,
immensely.
thank you, Jacob, for your work. You're playing your part too. And I
Right.
thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. God bless. John Audette, you're welcome back at any time. Viewers, please do check out eternia.org as well as John's, book. And, please be in touch with him. He's a tremendous pioneer and someone who has, changed the world. And I wouldn't be here sitting in my chair today without people like the John Audettes of the world. So we thank you for your contribution and continual contribution, I should
Thanks,
say.
Jake. Great to meet
Thank
you.
you. Well, thank you all for tuning in to our conversation with John Audette. That was an amazing conversation. This man has a wealth of information, and it really shows with his decades worthy of research and personal experiences that he's had. And this is a very engaging, uplifting, and empowering conversation for viewers, I'm certain. So please do check out John, his latest book, and please make sure to continue to follow us with our conversations coming your way and staying tuned by continuing to climb the ladder of ascension here on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you here next time as we continually ascend, grow, and elevate our awareness. Thank you.